Watch this.
We would be able to flesh this out further in a bill hearing.
Changing Idaho's voter initiative requirements has been fleshed out before and has failed. But once again, lawmakers are demanding their pound of flesh in wanting to make the process of power to the people more prohibitive. Property tax relief, term limits, and individual freedom, all things that came about through voter initiatives. We're going to show you how that process has stacked up through history. To give your brain a little legislative break, we're going to introduce you to the new American Slovak kitchen band, making music with mixing bowls and mayhem. There is another attempt to make it more difficult to mount a successful voter initiative campaign. The ability for Idaho voters to have a direct impact on state laws, some may say the truest form of democracy, not a republic. Well, this goes back more than 100 years in the Gem State. In 1912, the Idaho lawmakers and voters agreed to amend the state constitution to add a process for voter initiatives and referendums. It wasn't until 1933, however, that the mechanics of that process were put down on paper. 5 years later, the first voter initiative hit the ballots when voters created the Fish and Game Commission. Since then, there have been 30 initiatives brought before voters. Only 15 of them achieved the 50% plus one majority they needed to pass. That was a requirement established 89 years ago. Any measure referred to the people shall become a law when it is approved by a majority of the votes cast. The last to do so, that'd be the Medicaid expansion initiative 7 years ago. And sure, there have been tweaks to the laws since 1933, but the process has been pretty much the same over the decades. To get an initiative passed in Idaho, you need to collect signatures from 6% of registered voters in at least 18 of the 35 legislative districts. Now, that's just to get the measure on the ballot. Then you would need a majority of voters to approve it. But lately, on the heels of voters approving Medicaid expansion in 2018, lawmakers have tried to get a tighter grip on their exclusivity to make laws. Back in 2021, for example, they changed the signature collection requirement from 6% in 18 districts to 6% of voters in every district, all 35 across the state. But the state Supreme Court blocked that law, saying it violated voters' fundamental rights granted by the state constitution. Okay, so what if they just changed the Constitution? Well, they tried that in 2023, but Senate Joint Resolution 101 failed to get the two-thirds majority in the House. So that brings us to today. And this morning, Republican Representative Bruce Skog introduced a bill that would fundamentally change the voter initiative process, raising what it takes to pass by 10 percentage points. Here's Aspen Shumpert.
3 days into the 2025 legislative session, the first bill of the year is introduced.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, committee.
Right now, it takes a simple majority for a voter initiative to pass into law. But Representative Bruce Skog of Nampa believes they should require support from at least 60% of voters.
I'm trying to level the playing field a little bit.
An initiative is a measure brought forward by citizens rather than a lawmaker. If enough voters signed a petition, the initiative is put on the ballot. Skog says that makes it too easy to pass rules that haven't been properly vetted.
They're going to have to work a lot harder because we don't get to have full hearings on the issue in these. It's pure democracy, which I'll talk about in the bill hearing. And we don't like pure democracy. That has failed throughout history. We like a republic form of government, and that's what we have.
The representative hopes the bill would also prevent out-of-state investors from getting involved in what is intended to be an Idaho voter-driven process.
We've lost citizens' initiatives. They're no longer citizens' initiatives. We have millions of dollars pouring into our state to pay people to sign the initiatives. So really it's big corporations or big political interests that bring this on to us, and I don't like that.
Democrats on the House State Affairs Committee reminded Skog about previous changes to the initiative process have been challenged by the state's highest court.
We are pushing forward and a change the initiative process when the Idaho Supreme Court has ruled unambiguously that the initiative process is a fundamental right for Idaho voters.
That ruling doesn't worry Skog. He says he will continue to push this forward, using the ranked choice voting issue on November's ballot as an example of why what we have now isn't working.
People saw in Prop 1 the battles we had across the state, the millions of dollars that were spent, and there was still no real public dialogue or place we could have public hearings about the truth of the matter. So I'm hoping this will slow that down or at least level the playing field so that the voters have to be at a higher threshold on these difficult initiatives.
The Democrat Representative Achilles also pointed out that under Skogg's proposed 60% threshold, several initiatives like sales tax relief, property tax relief, and the homeowners exemption would not have had enough support to pass. The House of Affairs did vote to unanimously pass this, so it will be getting a hearing soon.
We'll be getting it printed and we'll get a hearing. So my question is, now the Prop 1, that kind of worked out in their favor, those that were against it.
Didn't pass. Right.
Despite all this money they claim coming in from out of state. And if that's the problem, I guess my question is, why not just change that part of the process, the money coming in from out of state?
And that's a good question. Might be one that comes up in the hearing when we hear a little bit more debate and opinions on the verbiage.
Okay, so it's being printed, as we mentioned, so we'll wait and see when it gets actually introduced starting out in the House State Affairs Committee.
That's right.
Thank you very much, Aspen. Well, as we already touched on, explaining his concerns about the bill, Representative Todd Achilles from Boise mentioned the Supreme Court ruling from 2021, saying any change to the voter initiative process would have to consider the state constitution. But he also pointed out the numerous laws we still have today would not exist if that approval threshold were raised to 60%. Other than voters denying a pay raise for lawmakers in 1970, you can thank voter initiatives for such things as property tax relief. There was the initiative passed in 1978, which would limit property tax increases to 1% of actual market value. It was actually based on California's Prop 13, which passed the previous June. So just another one that just came in from the Golden State. 58% of Idaho voters approved it back then. 4 years later, voters came up with the idea of the 50-50 property tax exemption, the homeowner's exemption, which meant 50% of the value of the home could not be taxed up to $50,000. 56.5% voted for that to go into effect. Then Idaho solidified itself as a right-to-work state because of a voter initiative in 1986. 54% of voters agreed employees should not be forced to join a union just to have a job. Now, that list that we just showed you there doesn't include the 4 voter initiatives passed to hold Idaho lawmakers to term limits. Those did pass with less than 60% of the votes, but even those voters were ignored when the legislature then voted to repeal those initiatives. So it seems voter initiatives are already pretty tough to pass, right? Even their success rate is only 50% right now. But it seems some of Idaho lawmakers are trying to make it even tougher and pull what little will of the people have right out of their hands. Well, so far, the House State Affairs Committee has been the only one with an agenda that we've looked at. A couple more coming up tomorrow and through next week, obviously. But yesterday, they got some attention by agreeing to print 2 pieces of legislation. A resolution to commend the Boise State women's volleyball team for forfeiting their conference and tournament games against San Jose State University. And another resolution brought forth by Representative Heather Scott.
So the purpose of this resolution is just to reaffirm our state authority to regulate marriage. That should be a job of the states, not of our courts.
Representative Scott's resolution called on the Supreme Court, the current Supreme Court, to revisit the 2015 ruling on Obergefell versus Hodges, which guaranteed the fundamental right of marriage to same-sex couples, which obviously goes against Idaho's current marriage law, defining it only between a man and a woman. Now, this was just a print hearing to decide if they want to move forward with it, put it on record, open it up for debate. And when that motion came up to vote to print that bill, many took notice of what they didn't hear.
Is there discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion is carried. It will be done.
Didn't hear any opposition to printing that bill, did you? Not even from the 2 Democrats seated on the House State Affairs Committee. And many on social media expressed their concern with that, believing they should have at least expressed their opposition to this bill, even this early in the process. Well, today, Democratic committee member Todd Achilles took a moment to explain why he and Representative Brooke Green didn't put up a nay vote.
You know, we make a decision to move bills forward in these print hearings out of respect for the legislative process. I think we both believe we should have been more clear yesterday that our vote is not one of support for a bill, but just a commitment to the democratic process.
So it's just part of the process. Representative Achilles explained it as good government, with the understanding the majority party will show the same respect when a member of the minority party, the Democrats, introduce a bill. One that just happens to come to mind might be any bill that will try to add the words sexual orientation and gender identity to the Idaho Human Rights Act, something that has been tried for 2 decades at the State House. And in those 20 years, an add the words bill has been printed twice, and there has been exactly 1 public hearing on it. All the other attempts have been personal bills, which historically have never really even gotten a hearing. Well, if Scott's resolution passes to go to the Supreme Court, it would do nothing to change Idaho law. Again, it already says it's between a man and a woman. It would just basically send a letter to the U.S. Supreme Court requesting them to return marriage rights to the states. Well, two different parking problems in Caldwell, but it all just boils down to what to do with and where to put their cars. And an update, Boise Fire did decide to send resources to help fight the wildfires in California, including 4 members of their team. Abby Wilt has more in today's 411.
4 wildfires are burning in Southern California, destroying over 1,000 houses and evacuating 30,000 people in the Pacific Palisades. Idahoans are not just checking in with their loved ones, but also finding ways to help. The National Interagency Fire Center here in Boise is busy coordinating relief efforts. Boise Fire and the Idaho Red Cross are on standby. The Caldwell parking meter saga isn't over yet. Remember, Caldwell decided not to renew the downtown paid parking contract a few months ago, eliminating paid parking. Now they're getting rid of the equipment, including the meters, and reselling them. Plus, the city owes the company they contracted with, the car park, $175,000. At least both parties said they still respect each other after the breakup.
I feel like the voice of people, and especially my generation, aren't being heard on this.
Back in early December, Caldwell proposed a new hotel, but parking became an issue, like it tends to be in Caldwell. The city initially proposed parking solutions on county property, including areas used for the county fair, but after negative reaction, the city is going to look for parking solutions on city land instead.
The parking plan that had to do with Canyon County's property, that was a mechanism for me to start a conversation about what possibilities could happen.
Going forward, they're looking at expanding already existing city-owned parking lots in the area. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Abby Wilt.
Have plunger? We'll play. From Prague to the land of potatoes, we're going to show you what it takes to be the best kitchen band in the business. It's more than just spoons, I can tell you that. Well, before you jump on your music app and download the latest kitchen band hits, we want you to use your phone to get in touch with us. Now's the time to add to the 208 conversation. Send your comments, your questions, and your complaints to 208-321-5614. And don't forget your name and the 208 hashtag. All right, quick show of hands. How many of us have music playing while you're cooking or baking and the sustenance session just kind of turns into a concert or a dance party? Whisks turn into microphones, wooden spoons turn into drumsticks. Well, what if you could take that deep dish drum solo to your local social club and perform it in front of a crowd? That's exactly what the new American Slovak Kitchen Band is doing right here in Boise. And as Hunter Funk explains, it's a recipe inspired by a Boise woman's grandmother and her kitchen band from the 1900s. And they also stir in some Slovakian history.
3, 3, My grandparents, both sets, came from Czechoslovakia, now known as the Slovak Republic. This is Grandma.
After walking from a village in Prague, getting on a boat with strangers, Jesse Pruska's family made the voyage, all settling in Chicago by the 1930s.
The Czechs had two sort of famous social clubs where a lot of Czech artists, writers, actors would come. Apparently at some point, someone came up with the idea to start a kitchen band. And the story is that all the men built the instruments and all the women, only women were in the band.
Jesse says they aren't sure exactly when the band started cooking.
This is the original kitchen band.
But her dad told her about the vivid memories from the 1950s and 60s of her grandma playing in the band. It was a chance to stir up joy together. But by the 1970s, a lot of families picked up their pots and moved out to the suburbs.
The social club sort of died out gradually.
Fast forward to 2017 when her grandma passed away. Jessie whipped up a song with her family and sang with the kitchen items her grandma used at the funeral.
I didn't know it was an open casket event, so there she was in her casket, and then we were here singing the song and wearing strainers and shaking things, and it was really fun.
This was the start of something old turned into something new again.
This picture is what gave us the inspiration for these hats that we've come up with.
After bringing the instruments from Chicago to Idaho, Jessie, also known as Bessie Baker, banded together with Spoonie McWheaton.
The more that we do with the kitchen band instruments, the more that I see their potential and start to open up with them and have more fun.
And Dusty Tynes.
Every time we play them, we come up with something different.
They use cans, plungers, kazoos, rope, really any household items. Jessie says it's bringing people together, just like it did when her grandma played.
I just thought it would be a great way to share the story of the instruments and the story of like these immigrants, and to actually play them in the community.
So we all cheer. Hey! And Jessie is wondering if there are other bands like hers still out there, because she'd love to talk about the history of another kitchen band. I also didn't see much online when I searched. Now, she also hopes people embrace the spontaneity that comes from these interesting instruments.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so they don't just play in their kitchen, right? They go out and about?
They actually go out and about. That was rehearsal.
Okay.
Even our producer, Katie, has seen them live at the late story night that was on. But right now I don't see anything event-wise, but they have a Facebook page. So if you want to follow them, it's their name, the New American Slovak Kitchen Band.
There you go. And any household item.
Yeah.
I saw a toilet seat in the background. Some of your shows. I don't know if I want to know what they do with that.
It's a guitar. It has strings.
Okay.
Yeah. So
All right.
that's I'm not going to name the name for that. If you want to, you can at home.
Just go see them live. I'm sure they'll tell you what it is.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks, Hunter.
Some beautiful, tranquil scenes from across the state, just gorgeous. But unfortunately, of course, in Southern California, not a lot is tranquil there. I thought we'd take a quick moment, check wind speeds around the Santa Monica, Los Angeles area where that Palisades fire continues to wreak havoc. What a difference 24 hours have made. These are our current wind gusts observed over the last couple of minutes. Still 20 to 30 mile per hour gusts, of course, coming off the mountains. These are those Santa Ana winds, so coming out of the north. But still, at this point yesterday and later into the evening, Burbank was clocking 70 mile per hour wind gusts, so it has eased quite a bit. That is great news on the fire front. Tomorrow we expect another uptick in those winds. We're looking at gusts 40 to 50 miles per hour with 60 to 65 mile per hour gusts along the mountaintops, but still not quite as intense as last night. So some slightly better news on the firefighting front there. All right, our look around the region shows a pretty pleasant but cold Wednesday evening. We've had a light breeze in play today, so wind chill has been a factor. Made that sunshine a little bit deceiving out there today. Still, Boise at 40 degrees right now. Twin Falls in the mid-30s. McCall has just dipped below 30 degrees. Look at the chilly evening taking shape in Sun Valley. We're down to 19 degrees already. Clear skies will persist overnight. We could see a little bit of patchy fog tomorrow as we have a very weak inversion that is in play right now. So our air stagnation advisory does continue through Friday, but temperatures tomorrow still hover just above normal. We'll land at 40 degrees with mostly sunny skies overhead and very light winds. So a pretty pleasant Thursday coming our way. Highs around the region in the Treasure Valley, upper 30s generally to right around 40 tomorrow. Mid 30s is where we'll land in Twin Falls for your Thursday afternoon. And after a frosty cold start in the mountains, we'll see upper 20s to low 30s for those high temperatures. All right, not much change on Friday, except clouds will likely start to move in. And eventually those clouds will drop some light snow Friday evening, maybe half an inch or so for the Treasure Valley. Behind the system bringing that snow, Saturday's a little bit cooler and breezy. And then we do start cooling off on Sunday with highs hovering right around the freezing mark. That's it each day through next Wednesday.
All right, several comments today about lawmakers' attempt to change the voter initiative process here in the state of Idaho. Representative Bruce Skog introducing that bill today in the House State Affairs Committee. Voter initiatives would not be required if legislators stayed in touch with their constituents, says Mark Peterson in Middleton. It's a good point. Get that complaint a lot, that they don't follow the will of the people, the ones that elected them. Why is the GOP afraid? The people choosing what is best for those people. Control of our state is for the people, not a party, says Larry. This one from Walt in Boise. Incredible Republican hypocrisy regarding initiatives. What about the outside money in every legislative race and pushing all the culture war issues like trans rights, library bills, bans, that kind of stuff? And what bills need 60% to pass the legislature, asked Walt. Well, it does. If there's going to be an amendment to the Constitution, it takes 60% in each chamber to give it to the people. Then it only takes a 50% vote from the people to change the Constitution. The best way to show respect for the democratic process is to voice strong opposition in the face of discrimination, says Marianne. This one from Jack in Boise. Skog has a lot of nerve to claim initiatives aren't well vetted, given how many laws the GOP legislature passed that have been found unconstitutional, including one that has to do with initiatives back in 2021. That's true. Do we think Skog may have introduced this ridiculous bill in anticipation of a voter initiative on, I don't know, say the abortion issue? A little truth and transparency in the State House would be such a welcomed change, says Ryan in Meridian. That's a possibility. Or there could be a medicinal marijuana initiative out there. A lot of them. All it takes is some initiative from some people to get it started, but, well, they want to make that a little bit more difficult. We'll see how far it goes, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KTVB Plus app everywhere you stream.